A visit to Leverkusen. At Baykomm, Bayer's new communication center, the company offers a dialogue with the general public. Face to face with a chemical company, with its vast array of products and its world of ideas.
Still no cure for AIDS.
We keep reading stories about new drugs.
If they could just stop the disease from spreading, finding a cure could wait.
What can the chemical industry do about the ozone layer?
I'm sorry to say that we haven't got any cure-alls. However, I certainly do think there's much that the chemical industry can do to alleviate certain problems. Solving these problems calls for a lot of scientific and technical expertise, not to mention large-scale industrial research institutes. If you don't have these, your hands are tied. Quite obviously, nobody today can turn a blind eye to what's going on anywhere on Earth.
A global village, one planet.
Yes, exactly. Everyone in the world is now our neighbor.
I'm afraid that doesn't reassure me. The chemical industry actually rather frightens me.
Which I quite understand. But generally, our prejudices are built on our only seeing the basic scientific ground rules of chemical production as complicated and not easy to understand. This is why we feel we have to make our philosophy and work easier to grasp. Here in our communications center, we're trying to do that.
A readiness to enter into a dialogue, a desire to communicate, and honesty with respect to those things which can and cannot be done are the hallmarks of Bayer's relationship with the community. A major chemical company depends on a broad consensus and the approval of the general public.
With an example from the crucial area of food production. And our contribution to that is crop protection.
There are plenty of alternatives around. Why do growers still use chemicals?
There are more than 5 billion people living in the world today. And with agrochemicals, our industry has a major role in growing enough food. Crop protection is a vital element in the growing cycle. We accept unreservedly that our products should be environmentally friendly, but also recognize the growers' need for cost-effective efficiency. Let's illustrate this with a film.
In the German town of Monheim, Bayer maintains the largest agrochemicals research facility in the world, the starting point for many auspicious future developments. The researchers here in Monheim take a critical look at the questions the public is asking. The most important of these is, how does an agrochemical behave within the natural cycle? The demands are high. A modern crop protection product should be biologically degradable. It must not interfere with the diversity of life in rivers, lakes and streams, the soil or the air. And it should deal quickly with the parasite and then disappear just as quickly without leaving any traces of its presence behind. Nobody should be adversely affected, except the parasite. This is the challenge facing the scientists here. The approach leads into the world of molecules. Deciphering their mysteries provides us with vital information on the relationship between a new substance's structure and its efficacy. This, for example, is why tests are run to determine if the growth of weeds can be inhibited without interfering in any way with the metabolism of cultivated plants. Another promising approach, combating parasites with their own natural enemies. What you see growing here is a useful fungus. Its name, Metarhizium anisopliae. A Monheim research team has taken this fungus and turned it into a crop protection product. It is effective against beetles which damage the roots of useful vegetation. Thanks to a process developed by Bayer, these fungi can now be manufactured for the first time in the form of granules and kept ready for use until needed. The granules absorb water in the ground, the fungi form spores and infect the parasite. A fatal encounter for this intruder. But what happens to a pesticide after successfully completing its job? What path does it take through nature? How does it behave in the soil? To study this more carefully, a sample of farmland is taken into the laboratory. Highly sophisticated analytical methods are used to study every detail of an active ingredient's behavior in the soil. The job here is to detect the very last residual elements that develop during the decay of an active substance. Products the scientists call metabolites. The substances are marked in such a way that incredibly small traces of them can still be detected. Even if their form and properties have undergone a complete transformation, they must still remain recognizable amongst thousands of other substances. Everybody agrees that nature should be protected. The change in the public's attitude towards ecological issues has also influenced the attitudes in the agrochemicals business. In the old days, preventive crop protection was often the only way to safeguard harvests. Nowadays, we can afford to wait in many cases until we can recognize what is attacking a particular crop, thanks to modern diagnostic methods and targeted plant protection. Only when things begin to look serious do we take action. The watchword here is, as much as necessary, as little as possible. This, today's concept, is based on the philosophy of integrated crop management. A sensible approach which combines traditional and modern agricultural methods in the interest of harmonizing the needs of economy and ecology.
Sounds impressive. Biological crop protection. Integrated agriculture, as you call it. I can certainly see it introduced here in Europe, where there are strict government controls. But what about other countries? The Third World, for instance?
There's no difference. We adhere strictly to the legal requirements of each country. And the company has its own rules that Bayer has devised for the Earth's protection and sustenance. Our guidelines for environmental protection and safety. Say in Mexico, for example, the company demands the same rigorous standards that apply in the European community. The only way to retain trust and credible status is to insist on our principles with the same determination in other countries and societies as we do in our own.
Mexico City, capital of an upwardly striving country with a population of 20 million. Bayer has been here for many years now. Not far from Mexico City, Bayer produces crop protection products, which for the most part are needed right here in Mexico. Fertile soil is found all over the country, especially here in the northwestern regions. As a result, Mexico is now able to feed itself. What's more, agricultural products have become important export items. Individual advice to customers and the field days, the Dias del Campo Bayer regularly holds, are primarily devoted to the question of correct and sensible application. Protecting the farm workers in the fields is as important as the ecologically sound application of the crop protection products.
Es una formulación que viene al 70%, es un polvo mezclable, cuyo nombre común.
Not everyone here can read and write.
Todos los productos de Bayer.
This is why Bayer consultants use pictograms, where normal means of communication would bring limited results. Intelligently and correctly applied crop protection products are helping this huge nation assure its own future. Everyone here knows, without effective agrochemicals, there will be no adequate harvests and no successful export trade. And the farmers will certainly have no reason to celebrate.
It does look to me a bit as though you're painting a rosy-tinted picture of what's going on.
Bayer is a kind of fairy godmother.
No, it certainly isn't. Companies like Bayer necessarily have to be successful financially, or otherwise they just don't stay in existence. But above and beyond that, our activities are largely determined by the interests of society. It's quite obvious our products have to be widely accepted. They have to be clearly useful. We can enlarge on this here in our exhibit on healthcare.
Aspirin.
Yes. You might well call aspirin the drug discovery of the century. But it's a far cry from the focal points of today's research, like cardiovascular diseases, for example.
Stress, time pressures, hustle and bustle, all this takes its toll on the human organism. In the Western industrial countries, cardiovascular diseases are among the most frequent causes of death. In Germany alone, they claim some 440,000 lives every year. Here, you can see test substances being evaluated on a living organ. In this case, an isolated rat heart. The heart becomes stronger. A first step on the way to a new drug for heart weaknesses. The side effects are still too great. This is why more tests are necessary until an active ingredient is found that meets the stringent requirements. Cardiovascular research is one of the key areas of activity for the scientists in the Bayer Pharmacological Research Center in Wuppertal. Thousands of substances are put through countless analytical processes. The right one just might be among them. The time and money spent on this research is considerable. It often takes 10 years and more before a drug that meets the rigorous requirements is ready for the market. More than 1,300 employees work together on an interdisciplinary basis to pinpoint the causes of illnesses more accurately and to find new ways to cure them. Every square foot of these research institutes is taken up by the equipment of cellular and molecular biologists, biochemists, and virologists. Working with microorganisms that cause diseases calls for a high level of responsibility. None of them must be allowed to escape to the outside. An elaborate security system with strict controls sees to it that they don't. A look at heredity. In 1953, scientists first succeeded in determining the molecular structure of the chemical which stores genetic information. Genetic engineering was born. This technology is the key to understanding the highly complex biochemical processes that make up life. This discovery brought with it completely new ways to determine the causes of illness. Genetic engineering has swung wide open the gates to a new generation of prescription drugs. Drugs which specifically target the complicated mechanism which leads to the outbreak of illness.
All well and good. However, one thing that does concern me is, suppose it went out of control.
Some geneticist playing at God.
Human beings, custom built?
Are we certain genetic engineering is justifiable ethically?
We would say yes. A view legal experts also take. I would suggest that knowledge is of itself neither good nor evil. The real issue is how we apply our knowledge. That means exploiting the opportunities that genetic engineering offers, with the risks kept as low as we can. Our in-house controls are already very stringent, and to double-check, our own tests are monitored by independent organizations. Getting back to your point whether genetic engineering is defensible, we wouldn't do anything that's possible. We're limited to clearly outlined areas. Human heredity interference is definitely outside those limits. And please remember this. We don't yet have cures for 2/3 of known illnesses. Genetic techniques will lead to new progress in healthcare. So we're investing in a brand new technology of the future, in Europe and in the United States as well.
New Haven, Connecticut, a university town on the east coast of the United States. In the middle of this region, with its immense research potential and just around the corner, so to speak, from the prestigious Yale University, Bayer has set up a pharmaceutical research center in which genetic engineering plays a cardinal role. Here, genetic engineering is being used to establish the cause of an illness about which we had previously been completely in the dark: Alzheimer's disease.
Abnormal cleavage and terminal of this A4 piece so that we can get it to aggregate.
One thing that's interesting, though, is that
Alzheimer's is a degenerative disease of the central nervous system, characterized by the death of brain cells in the central cortex. In its advanced stages, it can lead to a loss of all mental faculties. One characteristic of Alzheimer's disease is the deposit of so-called plaques in vital areas of the brain. The key question is, are these deposits the cause or simply a secondary symptom of the disease? To find the answer, Bayer scientists are attempting to transfer the gene responsible for plaque formation to animals not naturally subject to this disease. Should the formation of plaque in fact prove to be the cause of the death of the nerve cells, then genetic engineering can help develop a therapy to combat this disease. Still, just ideas. But the direction to take is getting clearer, and the prospects are encouraging. The researchers in West Haven are working in close cooperation with their Bayer colleagues in Wuppertal. They too cannot do without animal experiments. Many animals develop such conditions as hypertension, diabetes, or obesity, which run exactly the same or similar courses as they do in humans. This makes them ideal experimental models. Moreover, animal experiments are required and controlled by law. Failing to run them would mean violating the law. The animals are mostly supplied by breeders and are kept under optimum conditions.
I still feel sorry for them.
I'm not persuaded we really need to carry out all these experiments on animals. There must be some other way, mustn't there?
Are their lives expendable?
A good point. We can't say a rat's life is unimportant.
We have to strike a balance here as well. A balance between the desire to save human life and a respect for the life of a rat. I'm ready to admit that I'm uncomfortable about animal experiments. However, I realize some are necessary. The question is, how many animal experiments have to be done? You'll be glad to hear that in the last few years they've greatly reduced in number. We largely do tests here, employing cellular or bacterial cultures now. So, shall we carry on? Today, chemistry figures importantly in every aspect of modern life. Just think, for example, of the annual International Motor Show in Frankfurt.
There's hardly a vehicle in the world today that could run without plastics. Who would have thought only a few years ago that the very benefits of plastics, namely their durability and the variety of applications they provide, would become a source of increasing problems today. Piles of waste are growing at a menacing pace, and disposal sites are getting very scarce. Plastics may only represent 7% of all domestic waste, but still, every ton of plastic on the garbage dump is 1 ton too many. It represents a waste of useful material and valuable energy. Can we afford that? What we need here are concepts for the future leading to new directions and new solutions. These ideas are now being developed here in the plastics lab. Plastics made to measure. This was always the objective. Today there is an additional requirement. Plastics which can be largely recycled and easily disposed of. In order to recycle plastics, we need to establish proper collection procedures. And here lies one of the great problems, because not all plastics are the same. They can only be recycled if they are first sorted according to type. This is why Bayer has joined forces with the automotive industry to develop a labeling system which makes it easy to segregate different sorts of plastics. Homogeneous waste plastic parts, such as computer housings, can be very successfully recycled nowadays. But there is no such thing as endless recycling. From application to application, plastics lose quality. But there is still no reason why they have to end up as garbage. The most efficient method of relieving pressure on landfills is thermal treatment. Incineration is the best way to reduce the volume of waste. The energy content of the plastic helps incinerate the garbage while producing electricity or heat in a waste-fueled power plant. At the same time, every ton of discarded plastic saves 700 liters or around 180 gallons of heating oil. This is enough, for instance, to heat an average house for 3 months.
Okay, ecology is the #1 issue these days. It's on all our lips, it fills the papers, but really it ought to be taken for granted by now.
Right, and nothing gets done voluntarily, only in response to pressure.
Yes, obviously, consultation certainly teaches us new things, though we also set standards for ourselves. You may be surprised to know economy and ecology are equally important in our strategy. You see, all of us here at Bayer are part of society too. We have our families as well, and nobody wants to damage the environment. But we've got to put across the message that there isn't any industrial process that can be used with no risk at all, and with no waste product. So we always have to ask ourselves if a product or an industrial process is justified in the light of the latest data which scientists have found. Take, for example, the well-known CFCs.
Climate researchers have pinpointed chlorofluorocarbons, CFCs for short, as one of the causes, some of them natural ones, responsible for the hole in the ozone layer. By the end of 1994, at the very latest, Germany plans to impose a total ban on the production and use of CFCs. Bayer is not a manufacturer of CFCs, but the company does produce raw materials for polyurethanes, which until recently required the use of CFCs for further processing. Thanks to new production methods, flexible polyurethane foams, like the ones used to upholster car seats, can now be manufactured completely without CFCs. This is not the case with rigid foams, like the kind used to insulate refrigerators. Here, substitutes have been harder to find. Bayer's polyurethane research labs are currently working flat out to find suitable substitute materials. The example of CFCs demonstrates how important it is to study the effects of new products on the environment right from the development stage.
Sounds good, but I still have some doubts.
I think that if everybody cut down on consumption, that would ease a lot of ecological problems that are struck.
Agreed. However, industry is responsible for the rubbish left behind. They can't simply pass the responsibility to the consumer.
There's no question of buyer denying their own responsibility. And we do wonder sometimes if this is the right road we're currently going down. So it's vital we go on questioning our ethical value system and to keep assessing our direction. You begin with an idea, then you must find the right path.
As we move forward, we must keep our minds open. With the passage of time, with new findings and insights, society's perceptions change. Being part of the business community means, first and foremost, introducing innovations and thus helping to shape the future. But we must constantly question everything we achieve. Where innovation is concerned, it's in the nature of things that there are never any hard and fast rules and standards. These develop as society changes and progresses. Responsible behavior is essential when new territory is being explored. In the creative potential of mankind lies hope. New ideas leading to new directions.